Agatha Raisin and Roy Silver's PR scandal. Dear listeners, welcome to tonight's mystery. I'm Jane, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you here for another captivating tale. Tell me, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Drop your answer in the comments. I always enjoy learning more about our wonderful community. And do not forget to like and subscribe. It will motivate me for more mysteries every day. Now, let's get cozy and begin tonight's story. Chapter 1. The Glitter Turns Gritty. Agatha Raisin was enjoying a rare pocket of calm in her Carsley cottage, sipping strong coffee while sunlight softened the clutter around her. She had promised herself a peaceful morning with no clients, no village dramas, and certainly no fresh disasters. That illusion dissolved when her phone rang with frantic insistence. Roy Silver's name glowed on the screen, and Agatha felt the familiar tug of dread. Roy never called early unless something truly chaotic was brewing, and his breathless greeting confirmed it before she could even say hello. He launched into a desperate plea, insisting he needed her expert eyes at a glamorous PR showcase he was hosting in Meerster. Agatha tried to explain she had planned a blissfully uneventful day, but Roy begged with rising panic. Reluctantly, she agreed. Not long after, she arrived at the converted gallery, where glossy banners, polished floors, and impeccably dressed guests created an atmosphere thick with vanity. The scent of florals and wood polish mixed with the charged anticipation of people hoping to be noticed. Agatha moved through the chatter, scanning for Roy. He appeared in a flurry of nervous energy, clutching a clipboard like a lifeline, and thanking her with theatrical enthusiasm. She barely had time to question him when the lights dimmed. Guests drifted toward the main screen, expecting the promotional video Roy had promised. Agatha felt Roy tense beside her as the screen flickered, projecting not elegance, but grainy footage from an old charity event he had coordinated months ago. A distorted voice accused Roy of sabotaging the fundraiser, diverting donations, manipulating lists, and ruining reputations. Gasps rippled through the room. Phones rose as guests recorded every second. Roy made a strangled sound and clutched Agatha's arm. The clip ended with stark white text. "The truth deserves light." Whispers swelled into an eager hum, their tone a mix of shock, judgment, and thinly disguised delight. The atmosphere shifted instantly from celebration to spectacle. Roy swayed, forcing Agatha to steady him. She scanned the crowd, noting who avoided her gaze and who stared too intently. The pieces were scattered, but they hinted at design. Someone wanted Roy humiliated, not by accident, but with deliberate flair. Agatha straightened, feeling the familiar buzz of determination. Whatever this was, it had only just begun. Roy bolted from the main hall like a man possessed, clutching his clipboard as if it could shield him from a world suddenly turned hostile. Agatha barely had time to sigh before she followed, weaving through velvet ropes and startled guests. He ducked into a narrow staff corridor, eyes wide and hands trembling. "Agatha, please," he gasped, voice tight with panic. "You have to help me. If this gets out, my agency, my reputation, it's finished. Everyone will think I did it." Agatha leaned against the cool wall, arms crossed, taking in his frantic energy. "Roy," she said slowly, "you've already dragged me into half a dozen minor disasters this month. Why am I suddenly involved in your self-inflicted social apocalypse?" Roy's desperation was unmasked in a way even his usual theatrical flair couldn't conceal. His forehead glistened, and his lower lip quivered. "This isn't one of my, misjudgments. I swear, Agatha, someone is out to ruin me, and I don't know who. I can't handle it alone." For a long beat, Agatha studied him. She wanted to scoff, to refuse, to retreat to her quiet morning and her overdue cup of tea. Yet something in his eyes, pure, unfiltered fear, squeezed a reluctant empathy from her. Fine, she thought. She would help, but she would do it on her terms. "All right, Roy," she said, letting her voice stay calm despite her inner exasperation. "We'll sort this out, but only because it's clear you're deeper than usual." Roy's relief was almost comical, a mixture of gratitude and theatrical faintness. "Oh, thank heaven! You don't know what this means to me." He tried to straighten, still clutching her arm like a lifeline. Agatha gave him a pointed look, silently communicating that dramatics wouldn't help him now.
They returned to the event with cautious steps, passing groups of gossiping guests who barely noticed the pair. Agatha began quietly interrogating those willing to speak. "Did you see the original fundraiser?" she asked a sharply dressed woman holding a champagne flute. "Yes, but I didn't notice anything," the guest replied, though her eyes flickered with uncertainty. Other accounts conflicted, each story twisting subtly in favor of a different interpretation. Agatha noted these discrepancies, mentally filing contradictions like puzzle pieces. Through it all, she sensed the quiet weight of observation. Whenever she turned a corner, a shadow slipped just out of view. Someone was monitoring them, someone deliberate. Agatha's pulse quickened not with fear, but with the intrigue that had defined much of her private detective work. This was no ordinary PR disaster. Someone had planned the reveal with precision, orchestrating not just the video, but the reactions, the timing, the chaos. Roy muttered constantly, unsure where to stand, his attempts at casual mingling failing entirely. Agatha guided him subtly, asking questions to probe for inconsistencies, and gauging reactions from others. She noticed a staff member adjusting a name badge a little too frequently, a waiter lingering near the refreshments table with hands slightly shaking, and a man in a dark suit who seemed to vanish whenever Agatha approached. By the time they left the gallery, the event was winding down, but the air remained heavy with gossip and suspicion. Agatha walked beside Roy, who muttered about needing to escape the glare of society's judgment. She kept her eyes scanning, noting the faint glimmer of someone watching them from across the street as they stepped into the chilled evening air. Agatha's mind worked faster than her lips could speak. The scandal felt too perfect, too carefully timed. Her instincts told her Roy hadn't merely stumbled into trouble. He had been set up. Someone had studied his patterns, his pride, and his vulnerabilities. Someone wanted him to crumble, publicly, spectacularly. And Agatha Raisin, as always, would be the one who had to untangle the threads before the consequences became irreversible.
Chapter 2. Whispers Behind the Velvet Rope. Agatha Raisin stepped off the train in Meerster with a practiced air of leisure, though her mind was anything but idle. The crisp autumn air carried the faint scent of roasted coffee beans and freshly polished shop windows. She tucked her scarf more tightly around her neck, strolling slowly along cobblestone streets, as if she had no purpose beyond enjoying the city's charm. But every glance, every overheard snippet was an opportunity to gather information. Her boots clicked quietly on the pavement, a metronome accompanying her private investigation. Her first stop was a boutique known for dressing the city's PR elite. Inside, she was greeted by the faint hum of conversation and the rustle of silk and chiffon. Agatha lingered near the entrance, pretending to admire a display of scarves while listening to the gossip weaving through the room. A young assistant whispered to her colleague about Roy Silver, mentioning in a tone half awed, half alarmed, that he'd recently poached a high-profile client. Agatha's ears pricked. The client's name was Serena Vale, a woman renowned in PR circles for her flawless presentation and, according to more than one source, her ruthless streak. Serena's reputation was a tapestry of charm and calculated aggression, the kind that made competitors falter. Agatha smiled subtly. She could see it already. Anyone who'd recently lost out to Roy would have reason enough to harbor resentment. The boutique assistants seemed almost reluctant to talk further, glancing nervously toward the back of the shop. Agatha filed that away. Fear, she noted, was often more telling than pride. A nearby cafe offered another chance to eavesdrop. Agatha settled at a corner table, steaming cup of tea in hand, watching passers-by with the keen scrutiny of someone half on holiday, half detective. Two women near the counter whispered over pastries, their voices just loud enough for Agatha to catch fragments. "He didn't see it coming," said one. "She never loses graciously," said the other. Agatha's mind catalogued the pieces.
Serena Vale, the polished rival who had lost a client under dubious circumstances, was now squarely in her mental lineup of potential agitators. Continuing her stroll, Agatha drifted past a hair salon where gossip flowed as freely as conditioner. The stylist, a bright-eyed young man with a penchant for dramatics, mentioned that several employees at Roy's agency had been acting strangely since the scandal. "It's like everyone's afraid to say the wrong thing," he whispered conspiratorially, glancing toward the door as if the very walls had ears. Agatha's eyebrows arched. Fear, resentment, secrecy. Classic ingredients in the recipe of scandal. Yet the clues were tangled. Each snippet contradicted another. Some claimed Roy had been reckless. Others insisted someone was deliberately setting him up. Agatha made a mental note of these contradictions, recognizing the signature of careful orchestration. A pattern began to emerge. Whoever had engineered the public humiliation knew exactly how to manipulate perception, to sow doubt and confusion. By the time she passed the gilded facade of Serena Vale's office, Agatha felt the familiar thrill of curiosity tingling along her spine. Serena's perfectly poised smile greeted anyone who mentioned Roy's name, but her eyes flickered ever so slightly, betraying a hint of something else. Anger, fear, or perhaps calculation. Agatha paused, noting the exact tension in the staff members hovering discreetly in the background. Each person seemed to carry a fragment of the truth, yet none would speak freely. The city's glittering PR world was a maze, and she was beginning to map its hidden corridors, each turn revealing both a suspect and a secret. As the sun dipped behind the skyline, Agatha allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She had spent the afternoon ostensibly wandering, sipping tea and watching the world go by, but in reality she had built a mental roster of suspects, each with motive and opportunity. The mystery of Roy's downfall had grown more complex, but Agatha relished the challenge. Somewhere in the polished smiles and whispered rumors, the truth waited, and she was determined to find it.
Agatha Raisin arrived at Serena Vale's office with the practiced calm of someone entering enemy territory under the guise of civility. The lobby smelled faintly of citrus polish and expensive candles, an aroma carefully curated to impress. Serena greeted her at the door, beaming with an almost unnervingly perfect smile, her posture flawless, her dress tailored to convey authority and elegance. "Agatha, what a delight! Please do come in. I insist you must try one of our fresh pastries," she said, guiding Agatha toward a polished mahogany table where an assortment of delicate tarts and finger sandwiches awaited. Agatha seated herself, noting the subtle tension in the room. Serena poured tea with meticulous precision, each movement choreographed, each gesture measured. "Now, let's discuss Roy, shall we?" Serena began, brightly, too brightly, and Agatha raised an eyebrow, resisting a smile. Serena's words flowed smoothly, insisting she had absolutely no involvement in the recent scandal. "Honestly, Agatha, I would never dream of harming a colleague in that manner. Roy's difficulties, well, they are entirely of his own making, I'm sure," she added, giving the tiniest twitch of a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. As Serena spoke, her assistant hovered nearby, adjusting silverware and sliding trays with slightly trembling hands. When Serena mentioned the anonymous video, the young assistant dropped a small plate with a soft clatter. "Oh!" she exclaimed, cheeks flushing pink, and hurriedly righted the plate. Agatha noted the slip, filing it mentally as a minor yet telling detail. Nervous gestures like this often revealed more than words, and the assistant's reaction suggested she knew something Serena was hiding. Serena leaned back in her chair, eyes fixed politely on Agatha, yet her fingers tapped an anxious rhythm against the edge of her cup. "Of course, Roy is talented, in his way," Serena continued, choosing her words carefully, "but he has always been somewhat careless with clients.
High-profile accounts require subtlety, foresight, qualities he occasionally overlooks. Her gaze flicked toward a framed photograph on the table. At Agatha's glance, Serena quickly moved it aside, the action too swift to seem casual. A small clue, perhaps insignificant to others, but to Agatha it hinted at secrets being shielded from view. Agatha sipped her tea slowly, savoring the warmth and mild sweetness, using the moment to watch Serena more closely. Every smile, every polite intonation was measured. The room itself, a study in elegance and quiet authority, seemed to amplify Serena's carefully crafted persona. Yet under the surface, Agatha sensed tension, an over-controlled anxiety that suggested something more than mere professional rivalry. Something lingered behind the mask, an intention or knowledge Serena was determined to protect. They spoke of the Meerster PR scene in general, with Serena offering observations that seemed innocuous, yet each comment contained subtle undercurrents of warning or misdirection. Agatha noted the contradictions between Serena's assurances and the nervous behavior of her assistant. Each nuance, the way Serena's shoulders stiffened at certain questions, the half-hidden expressions, and the slightly evasive eye contact added layers to a puzzle Agatha felt compelled to unravel. When the tea concluded, Serena escorted Agatha to the door with the same impeccable politeness, her smile wide and practiced. "Do come again, Agatha. We must continue our delightful chats. Always so enlightening." Agatha nodded, masking her suspicions beneath a courteous farewell. As she walked back onto the street, inhaling the brisk autumn air, she reflected on the meeting. Serena Vale was hiding something. Whether it was guilt, fear, or a mix of both, Agatha could not yet tell. But she knew one thing for certain. The polished veneer of Meerster's PR elite concealed far more than it revealed, and she intended to find out exactly what.
Chapter 3. Roy's Past Comes Knocking. Agatha Raisin arrived in London on a drizzly afternoon, the kind of weather that blurred the city into muted grays and soft reflections on wet pavement. She hailed a cab and instructed the driver to take her to the towering office building where Roy had spent the earlier part of his career. Her plan was simple: dig into his professional past, quietly and unobtrusively, to see if any old grudges or mishaps could explain the scandal that had so publicly humiliated him. Inside the lobby, the hum of fluorescent lights mingled with the low murmur of office staff. Agatha approached the receptionist, a young woman with a clipboard and a wary expression. "I'm here to see records about Roy Silver's time here," Agatha said, casually, offering a polite smile. The receptionist hesitated, eyes darting toward the elevators and then back. I think that would require authorization," she murmured, her tone carefully neutral. Agatha nodded, sensing the reluctance and the invisible tension of secrets kept too long. After a few carefully chosen words and a little deft charm, Agatha was granted limited access to staff who remembered Roy. One former colleague, a sharply dressed man with a permanent crease of impatience in his forehead, described Roy as exceptionally talented, but prone to stepping on toes. "He's brilliant," the man said, sipping his coffee, "but he has this knack for creating chaos without meaning to. You'd think it was intentional, but often it's just carelessness." Agatha jotted mental notes, her curiosity piqued by the subtle blend of admiration and exasperation in his tone. Then she met Fiona, a bitter ex-assistant who had once worked directly under Roy. Fiona's eyes narrowed as she recounted a particularly painful incident. "He accidentally leaked an internal email," she said, voice tight with lingering resentment. "Because of that, I lost a job opportunity. Completely ruined my chance to move up. And of course Roy didn't even realize the damage he'd caused at the time." Agatha's mind ran through the implications. Could this past carelessness have blossomed into public scandal? It seemed plausible on the surface, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the timing was far too precise, far too calculated. Agatha moved through the office records, noting details about Roy's projects and client histories.
Some files bore signs of recent tampering, dates altered, entries overwritten. Whoever had orchestrated the anonymous video must have had access to intimate knowledge of these records. Karma alone wouldn't explain this. Someone had deliberately chosen the moment, meticulously editing footage, manipulating the narrative, and presenting it to the world in a way designed to hurt him professionally. Before leaving, Agatha struck up a conversation with the receptionist again, trying to read between her careful words. A pause, a flicker of unease, and then a name slipped almost accidentally: Garrick Bloom. Agatha's interest sharpened. The name connected faintly to earlier whispers she had picked up about Roy's recent client disputes and hinted at someone with both motive and capacity to orchestrate public humiliation. Walking back into the rainy London streets, Agatha pulled her coat tighter against the chill, considering the tangled web she had begun to uncover. Roy's past was messy, filled with unintentional offenses and professional missteps, but the scandal was clearly not merely karmic payback. The precision, the timing, and the inside knowledge suggested deliberate intent. And now, with the name of Garrick Bloom in her mental file alongside Roy and Serena, Agatha felt the faint thrill of a trail she was finally ready to follow. Someone had set the stage, and she was determined to uncover every actor playing their part.
Agatha returned to Carmsley that evening with a sense of mounting impatience. The quiet village streets were a sharp contrast to the chaos that Roy had endured, yet she knew tranquility was only temporary. She found him pacing in his office, muttering half-formed excuses and running a hand through his perpetually toweled hair. His eyes widened when he saw her, and he stammered, "Agatha? I wasn't expecting you back so soon." "Sit down, Roy," Agatha said firmly, crossing her arms. "We need to talk, and this time I want the truth. All of it." Roy sighed, flopping into the chair opposite hers, looking both relieved and overwhelmed. "Well, truth, yes, but..." His voice trailed off, and Agatha leaned forward, forcing him to meet her gaze. "Someone warned me," he admitted reluctantly. "Weeks ago. Someone suggested that a sabotage attempt might be coming, but I dismissed it. I thought it was just jealous whispers, gossip, nothing more." He ran a shaky hand over his face. "I didn't take it seriously. Clearly I should have." Agatha tilted her head, noticing more than just his words. There was a tremor in his fingers, a subtle panic that went beyond professional embarrassment. He wasn't just worried about his career. Something deeper was at stake. She kept her tone calm but probing. "And this investor you mentioned? The one who approached you recently?" Roy's eyes flickered, and he hesitated, glancing away. I didn't accept their offer. I thought it was a little, suspicious?" He cleared his throat, rubbing his forehead. "Honestly, Agatha, I can't remember the name right now. It's on the tip of my tongue." Agatha's gaze sharpened. That tip-of-the-tongue routine was classic Roy Silver, a mix of forgetfulness and avoidance. "You mean to tell me you rejected a partnership from someone whose identity you can't even recall?" she asked, her voice edged with amused disbelief. He laughed nervously, the sound more anxious than jovial. "Yes, well, I did, but it wasn't entirely about suspicion. Something felt off. Not wrong exactly, just uncomfortably calculated." Agatha pressed, leaning closer, letting her eyes suggest that she would not let this go. Off. How? Who was it? Finally, Roy exhaled, as if releasing a burden he had carried alone. "Garrick Bloom, a publicity fixer. Well, let's just say he has a reputation. Not the sort you'd invite to tea. Dark reputation. Underhanded. Dangerous." Agatha's eyebrows rose. Garrick Bloom. The name resonated with the fragments she had already uncovered. Someone with motive, resources, and the audacity to manipulate events behind the scenes. She noted the hesitation in Roy's voice and the subtle tremor in his hands. The fear wasn't just professional embarrassment. It was a realization that the stakes had shifted into something more dangerous than mere gossip or jealousy. "So,
she said carefully, letting the words hang. "You rejected a partnership, and now someone has orchestrated a public scandal? Coincidence?" Roy shrugged, his mouth tight. I don't know, but something tells me it's connected. Garrick Bloom doesn't make moves without reason, and he certainly doesn't act alone." His gaze met hers, tinged with vulnerability. I shouldn't have ignored the warning." Agatha leaned back, her mind already turning over the new information. The puzzle pieces were shifting from personal grudges to a larger, more insidious game. Someone with access, influence, and intent had chosen Roy as a target. She felt that familiar tingle of anticipation, the quiet thrill of a new layer of mystery unfolding. It wasn't just about saving a reputation anymore. It was about uncovering the carefully concealed threads of a dangerous plan, and Agatha Raisin, as ever, was ready to follow them wherever they led.
Chapter 4. Tracks in the Glitter. Agatha Raisin stepped into the quiet, wood-paneled office of Mearster's financial advisor with the careful poise of someone who knew exactly what she was looking for. The advisor, a man with salt and pepper hair and an expression that suggested both discretion and weariness, gestured to a leather chair. "Please, Ms. Raisin, have a seat. How can I help you today?" Agatha settled in, letting her gaze casually drift over the room. Stacks of folders were arranged with meticulous care, and the faint aroma of polished mahogany and old paper filled the air. "I'm interested in Garrick Bloom," she began, choosing her words deliberately. "I need to understand the scope of his business dealings, specifically how he operates with PR agencies." The advisor's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, a subtle tightening of the jaw that didn't go unnoticed. He leaned back in his chair and spoke in a lowered tone, as if the walls themselves might carry the conversation. "Garrick Bloom, yes, he's influential, more than most people realize. He tends to fund high-profile projects, but he does so with leverage." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Agencies that cooperate benefit handsomely. Those who refuse often find themselves facing sudden, inexplicable reputational disasters. It's a pattern, repeated enough to be deliberate." Agatha's interest piqued. "And you think Roy Silver might be his next target?" she asked, masking the sharp edge of urgency in her voice with a calm curiosity. The advisor hesitated, then nodded subtly. "It would seem so. Roy's scandal. It has all the hallmarks: timing, execution, the subtle manipulation of perception. Bloom's influence is expanding. He doesn't act randomly. This could very well be the first of several blows intended to demonstrate his reach. He likes to set examples." His eyes flicked toward a ledger on a nearby shelf, its spine cracked with use. Agatha's fingers itched to peek, though she refrained, noting the heavy redactions that suggested sensitive financial transactions. Each page, each smudge of ink, suggested a story Agatha was determined to uncover. Before leaving, she thanked the advisor for his discretion. As she stepped back onto the bustling streets of Mearster, the late afternoon light glinting off shop windows, she felt the familiar thrill of progress. The conspiracy was no longer just a vague threat. It had structure, intent, and scope. Bloom was expanding, and Roy had unwittingly become a pawn. Yet another layer lay hidden, a mystery informant shaping events from the shadows. Agatha straightened her coat and adjusted her scarf, determined to follow the trail wherever it led. The glittering facade of the PR world might dazzle the public, but she knew exactly where to look for its dark, unseen currents.
Agatha Raisin returned to her Carsley cottage late that afternoon, the skies streaked with dusky pink and gold, the village streets unusually quiet. She unlocked the door to Raisin Investigations with a practiced turn of her key, only to pause mid-step. Something felt off. The faint scent of disturbed air, the subtle misalignment of her carefully arranged papers. It was a whisper of intrusion, enough to make her heart skip a beat. Inside, drawers were slightly ajar, files shuffled haphazardly, and her usually immaculate cabinet bore the unmistakable signs of being searched. Agatha's eyes swept over the room with methodical precision. Nothing appeared stolen, yet the disorder spoke volumes. Whoever had entered hadn't come to rob her of valuables. They had been looking for something far more specific, her investigation notes. She moved carefully, noting a single muddy footprint near her desk, faint but telling. Whoever had done this had been careful, precise, and purposeful. The thought of danger briefly tugged at the edge of her mind, but she was unwilling to admit fear outright. Instead, she began cataloging the anomalies. The drawers disturbed, the files rearranged, and her usually immaculate cabinet bore the unmistakable signs of being searched. Agatha's eyes swept over the room with methodical precision. Nothing appeared stolen, yet the disorder spoke volumes. Whoever had entered hadn't come to rob her of valuables. They had been looking for something far more specific, her investigation notes. She moved carefully, noting a single muddy footprint near her desk, faint but telling. Whoever had done this had been careful, precise, and purposeful. The thought of danger briefly tugged at the edge of her mind, but she was unwilling to admit fear outright. Instead, she began cataloging the anomalies. The drawers disturbed, the files rearranged, and most glaringly, a USB drive that Roy had once handed her, now missing from its usual spot. Whoever had taken it knew its importance, or at least suspected it held critical information about the Bloom affair. Agatha felt a ripple of concern, tinged with frustration. She had been too focused on connecting dots in Mercer to consider someone might already be tracking her. A soft knock on the door drew her attention. Bill Wong, her steadfast friend and occasional assistant in investigations, stepped inside, concern etched across his features. "Agatha, I had a feeling something might happen," he said, scanning the room quickly. "Have you been compromised? Anyone dangerous following you?" Agatha waved a hand dismissively, though she appreciated his presence. "Bill, it's nothing major. Just someone curious," she said lightly, though her mind was already calculating. "They rummaged, looked around, but didn't take anything of real value. Probably after the files on Bloom, I imagine." Bill frowned, his gaze lingering on the disarray. Curious or not, they knew exactly what they were looking for. "Agatha, this isn't just gossip. Bloom's influence runs deep. Someone doesn't want you to connect the dots." Agatha gave a wry smile, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I'm aware," she said softly, though the warmth in Bill's concern offered a comforting counterpoint to the tension. She allowed herself a moment to process the intrusion. The carefulness of the break-in suggested not just interest, but urgency. Someone wanted to stop her before she uncovered the truth. Her eyes drifted toward the doorway, catching the faint shadow of a figure outside, blurred in the dimming light. She felt the familiar prickling sensation of being watched, subtle but undeniable. Whoever had been inside her office had not only taken the USB, but had left a message. They were aware of her progress, and they were prepared to intervene. Agatha squared her shoulders, determination replacing unease. Whoever it was, they underestimated her. She had seen through too much, and now more than ever, she intended to see this investigation through to the end.
Chapter 5. The Rivalry Turns Deadly. Agatha Raisin arrived at Serena Vale's sleek office under a pale morning sky, the city streets quieter than usual, lending a strange intimacy to her visit. Serena met her at the door, visibly unsteady, a stark contrast to the usual poised perfection that defined her public persona. Her usual immaculate suit appeared slightly rumpled, and the perfect smile she often wore now trembled at the edges. "Agatha," she whispered, voice tight, "thank you for coming so quickly. There's been a development." Inside the office, Serena gestured to a small seating area where Agatha noted the subtle signs of chaos: papers scattered on the floor, a chair pushed askew, and a faint scent of scorched paper. "Sit," she urged, her hands shaking slightly as she poured tea with less precision than usual. "Something's happened to my assistant. She
She's gone missing." Agatha leaned forward, curious and concerned. "Missing? When?" Serena took a deep breath, glancing toward a half-burned note on the coffee table, the edges curled and blackened. "Yesterday evening," she said, voice quivering. "She came to me, whispered that she knew who created the video against Roy, and she gave me this before disappearing. Just one word. One word, Agatha. Bloom." Her hands trembled as she held the note aloft, the single, stark word scrawled in hurried, almost desperate handwriting. Agatha's mind raced. Garrick Bloom, already the shadowy figure behind the PR disasters, was now connected to a missing person. She noted the subtle flicker of fear in Serena's eyes, the way she kept glancing toward the office door as if expecting it to burst open at any moment. Serena's polished mask had shattered, replaced with genuine fright. This was no longer a matter of competition, scandal, or reputation. The stakes had become painfully real. Serena's voice dropped to a whisper. I don't know who to trust anymore. My assistant was careful, loyal, but she knew too much. And now she's gone." Her words broke, and she covered her face with her hands for a brief moment. "Agatha, I need your help, please. She could be in real danger." Agatha studied her, weighing suspicion against empathy. Serena had been a rival, yes, sly, ruthless in her pursuit of clients, polished to the point of perfection, but fear had stripped her of pretension. There was vulnerability in her gaze, a raw honesty that couldn't be faked. Agatha felt the familiar tug of duty and curiosity. Reluctantly, she nodded. "All right, Serena. We'll find your assistant, but I need every detail. Everything she told you, every name, every hint." Serena handed her a small folder, trembling hands betraying the panic she tried to contain. Inside were notes, scribbles, and the cryptic single-word message. Agatha took careful stock of each piece, noting subtle hints, the assistant's nervous circles around letters, the emphasis on Bloom, and minor notations that suggested knowledge of more than just Roy's scandal. As Agatha rose to leave, she paused by the window, scanning the streets below. A shadow moved too quickly across the pavement, disappearing before she could focus on it. Her instincts prickled. Whoever had taken the assistant, whoever was orchestrating these events, was aware, watching, and prepared to act. The tea remained untouched, the warmth forgotten, as Agatha adjusted her coat and scarf. This investigation had escalated far beyond PR disasters and professional rivalries. Now it involved fear, disappearance, and perhaps even danger to life itself. With one last glance at Serena's anxious expression, Agatha felt the familiar spark of determination. Whoever was behind this, Garrick Bloom, a mysterious informant, or someone entirely else, would have to answer to her, and she intended to make sure of it.
Agatha Raisin and Bill Wong moved quietly through the cobblestone streets of Mercer, the afternoon sun low and casting long shadows over shop fronts and cafes. Agatha's mind raced as she retraced the steps of Serena Vale's missing assistant, asking herself what had gone wrong and how quickly. The first stop was a small boutique where the assistant had been seen just the day before. The shopkeeper recalled her passing through, nervous but composed, carrying a slim folder. Next, they spoke to a barista at a nearby cafe. She came in around noon, the young woman said, her voice low, bought a tea and a scone, looked over her shoulder a lot, as if someone was watching her. Agatha made a mental note of the watchful behavior, an indication that the assistant already sensed danger. Outside, the narrow alleyways shimmered under the late sun, and Agatha's sharp eyes scanned for anything out of place. Taxi drivers provided additional fragments. One remembered picking up a passenger who had seemed reluctant to speak, then requested to be let out near a back street rather than the usual thoroughfare. "Quiet alley, away from the crowds," he said, shaking his head. Something felt off. Agatha's mind connected the dots, each fragment building a map of movement, tension, and risk. Finally, they arrived at a small electronics store that maintained a modest CCTV system. The owner agreed to show the footage from the day the assistant disappeared. Agatha leaned forward, her brow furrowed, as the grainy images flickered on the screen. There, among the wavering pixels, she saw the assistant walking briskly toward a narrow alley. Moments later, a figure emerged from the shadows and gently guided her inside. The alleyway swallowed them both, and the footage ended with only the empty street visible. Agatha's stomach tightened with a cold certainty. This was no longer about scandal or reputational sabotage. This was a hunt, a deliberate pursuit of someone who knew too much. Her gaze swept the frames repeatedly, noting the figures' build, the way they moved. Vaguely familiar, it reminded her of someone she had encountered during the earlier PR investigations, but the graininess of a video made identification impossible. Near the entrance to the alley, Agatha spotted a small dropped item caught on a lip of light in the footage. A scarf, delicate and slightly frayed at the edges. She crouched, mentally noting its presence. Whoever had taken the assistant had been careful, but not flawless. Small mistakes, like this scarf, often revealed more than appearances suggested. Bill Wong frowned, crossing his arms. "Agatha, we should take this to the police. They can track the alley, canvass witnesses, maybe trace the van or the person who led her away." Agatha shook her head, eyes still glued to the flickering images. "Not yet," she said, softly but firmly. "If we alert the authorities too soon, it could put her in more danger. Whoever is behind this is methodical, careful. They'll disappear before the police arrive. We need to understand who we're dealing with first." Bill exhaled, clearly frustrated, but he trusted her instinct. Agatha leaned closer to the screen again, noting the silhouette shape, the way they carried themselves, and the unmarked white van parked in multiple locations earlier in the footage. Her mind churned, connecting shadows, alleyways, and evasive movements. Whoever had orchestrated this disappearance was clever and ruthless, but Agatha Raisin, as always, was determined to stay one step ahead.
Chapter 6. Pieces of the Puzzle. Agatha Raisin found Roy in his office the next morning, pacing in circles with the kind of anxious energy that seemed almost magnetic. The air smelled faintly of burnt coffee, and the soft hum of electronics in the background added a rhythm to his restless movements. "Roy," she began, her voice measured but firm, "we need to talk about those meetings you had with Garrick Bloom." Roy froze mid-step, blinking at her as though she had suddenly revealed a ghost. "Meetings?" he echoed, a little too quickly. I spoke to him, yes, but it was nothing serious." "Nothing serious?" Agatha raised an eyebrow, folding her arms. "Roy, you met him weeks before the fundraiser, repeatedly, in private. Don't play coy, I know." Roy exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "I admit it," he said, shoulders slumping. "He made an offer. A partnership, big money, influence. I was tempted. It sounded impressive, but I refused. I thought it best to stay independent, to protect my agency and clients." Agatha studied him carefully, noting the hesitation in his eyes and the subtle tension in his jaw. Something was being held back, a personal weight he wasn't sharing. Fear, perhaps, or guilt? She couldn't be sure. "You're not telling me everything," she said softly, letting her voice carry just enough to unsettle him without anger. "Something else happened during those meetings. Something that matters now." Roy swallowed, glancing away, and muttered, I didn't anticipate any of this scandal. I didn't think anyone would—" He stopped abruptly, as if the words themselves were dangerous. Agatha sighed, walking over to the small stack of files he had provided her for reference. She leafed through the papers, scanning for inconsistencies. Her sharp eyes caught a series of coded notes tucked between invoices, references to payments made to accounts with vague labels. No names, no details, just sequences of numbers and initials. "Roy," she said, tapping the page. "What are these?" "I don't know," he insisted too quickly. I never authorized anything like that. Those aren't mine, I swear."
Agatha studied his expression, weighing his words against the evidence in her hands. Something was moving money using Roy's credentials, and he was either oblivious or intentionally misleading her. But the precise timing, the sophisticated coding, and the way the notes intertwined with the agency's legitimate accounts suggested someone inside his operation had access, someone trusted enough to manipulate the system without immediate detection. Her eyes scanned the files again, noting subtle discrepancies, signatures that seemed slightly off, dates that didn't align with official invoices, and the carefully layered coding that would conceal transfers from anyone not paying close attention. Someone had created a hidden network, using Roy as a cover. The conspiracy had expanded beyond a mere public scandal. It now pointed directly to a mole inside the agency, a shadowy figure leveraging trust and authority to achieve their own ends. Roy shifted uneasily, fidgeting with a pen. I don't know who could do this, he admitted, voice low. I trusted everyone. Agatha leaned back, letting him feel the weight of her scrutiny. Trust is a luxury, Roy, and right now someone has exploited yours. But don't worry. We'll figure out who's behind this and why. You're not off the hook, but neither is anyone else. Her eyes lingered on the coded notes, her mind tracing patterns, timelines, and the network of forged signatures hidden in plain sight. The pieces were beginning to align, though the full picture remained tantalizingly out of reach. Whoever had infiltrated Roy's agency had done so with planning and precision, but Agatha Raisin was always one step behind, ready to uncover the truth.
Agatha Raisin was in the midst of sorting through Roy's files when her phone buzzed sharply on the desk. It was Bill Wong, and the urgency in his tone made her sit up straight immediately. "Agatha," he said, voice low but tight with concern, "we found something. The missing assistant's phone. It was discovered in a field not far from Garrick Bloom's office complex." Agatha's stomach tightened, a cold knot forming that spoke of every fear she had tried to push aside. "Near Bloom's offices?" she repeated, steadying her voice. "Bill, that doesn't bode well." "I know," he admitted, "but we need to stay calm. The field is isolated, yes, but there are no signs of a struggle nearby. It's suspicious, but it doesn't confirm the worst. Not yet." Agatha held the phone in her hand when Bill brought it over, noting the pristine wipe of data. Whoever had abandoned it had been careful, but not careful enough. She traced a fingertip over the case and froze at a subtle mark, a small, strange symbol, carved delicately into the corner. It wasn't immediately recognizable, but it had an air of deliberate design, perhaps a signature or a warning. Bill sighed, leaning against the doorway. "That's not all. I've just received word that Garrick is hosting a private industry gathering tonight. It's invitation only, very exclusive, and the timing feels deliberate, too close to the assistant's disappearance to be coincidence." Agatha's stomach tightened, a cold knot forming that spoke of every fear she had tried to push aside. "Near Bloom's offices?" she repeated, steadying her voice. "Bill, that doesn't bode well." "I know," he admitted, "but we need to stay calm. The field is isolated, yes, but there are no signs of a struggle nearby. It's suspicious, but it doesn't confirm the worst." "Not yet." Agatha held the phone in her hand when Bill brought it over, noting the pristine wipe of data. Whoever had abandoned it had been careful, but not careful enough. She traced a fingertip over the case and froze at a subtle mark, a small, strange symbol, carved delicately into the corner. It wasn't immediately recognizable, but it had an air of deliberate design, perhaps a signature or a warning. Bill sighed, leaning against the doorway. "That's not all. I've just received word that Garrick is hosting a private industry gathering tonight. It's invitation only, very exclusive, and the timing feels deliberate, too close to the assistant's disappearance to be coincidence." Agatha's mind raced, connecting dots. A private gathering, the missing assistant's phone found near Bloom's offices, and coded notes circulating under Roy's credentials. It all pointed to a larger game. Whoever was orchestrating this had a strategy, and tonight might be the stage where pieces were exposed, intentionally or by chance.
"We'll go," she said finally, determination sharpening her tone. "Roy and I will attend under cover. We might be able to flush out the mole, gather information, and, hopefully, learn the assistant's fate." Bill frowned slightly, a mixture of apprehension and respect in his gaze. "It's risky, Agatha. This isn't a social event. Bloom's influence, he won't hesitate to use threats or leverage. You know that." "I know," Agatha replied, adjusting her coat and scarf. "But risk is part of uncovering the truth. And right now, someone has crossed the line from sabotage into endangering lives. We can't wait for permission or proof. We have to act." She looked down at the phone again. The wiped data, the carved symbol, and the faint traces of handling all whispered the urgency of the situation. Whoever had taken it or left it was sending a message, and Agatha intended to read it carefully. Bill glanced at her, concern softening into quiet confidence. "All right, Agatha. I'll be your side. Let's see what tonight brings." As the afternoon waned into early evening, Agatha's mind was already plotting strategy, imagining routes, exits, and how she and Roy might navigate the crowd without drawing attention. The private gathering promised answers, confrontation, and revelation. Somewhere in the swirl of polished guests and hidden agendas, the missing assistant's trail awaited, and Agatha Raisin was determined to follow it wherever it led.
Chapter 7. The Night of Revelations. The grand hall of the industry gala glittered under crystal chandeliers, each light reflecting off polished surfaces and expensive glassware. Agatha Raisin and Roy Silver moved through the crowd with practiced composure, Roy awkwardly adjusting his tie while Agatha's eyes scanned every corner. Every interaction, the scent of fine perfume mingled with the soft hum of polite conversation, masking an undercurrent of ambition and quiet rivalry that Agatha knew all too well. Garrick Bloom stood near the center of the room, a picture of effortless charisma. His smile was smooth, his posture relaxed, and yet Agatha noticed the calculating precision behind each movement, the way his eyes lingered on certain guests, the subtle nods and gestures, all spoke of a man used to orchestrating outcomes without ever raising suspicion. Agatha tucked herself slightly to the side, letting her gaze trace every interaction, noting those who appeared tense, anxious, or overly attentive. Each nuance, each hesitation was a thread in the tapestry she was quietly unraveling. Agatha's mind mapped the room meticulously, connecting prior conversations, rumors, and the trail of subtle betrayals. During a staged networking moment near the bar, the clink of glasses and polite laughter provided the perfect cover for whispered exchanges. Agatha leaned closer to a pair of attendees engaged in hushed conversation, catching fragmented words: credentials, transfer, opportunity, Bloom. The fragments were enough. Her pulse quickened with a mixture of excitement and horror. Someone close to Roy had willingly provided information to Garrick Bloom in exchange for career advancement. The final betrayal, which had seemed abstract until now, crystallized sharply in her mind. She watched the shadowed figures slip toward the backstage corridor, their movements deliberate yet subtle, avoiding the main clusters of guests. Agatha's instincts flared. This was no accidental positioning. Every gesture, every glance, every whispered word had been part of a careful performance designed to maintain appearances while furthering hidden agendas. Roy, oblivious to the subtle tension building around them, fumbled slightly with his wineglass, earning a quiet chuckle from Agatha. "Careful, Roy," she murmured under her breath, eyes never leaving the suspect. Everything here has meaning. The gala continued around them, lights shimmering on silver trays, champagne flowing into crystal flutes, laughter punctuating whispered threats and private deals. Agatha's notebook, tucked discreetly in her clutch, was already filling with observations, patterns, and connections. The room, so dazzling to outsiders, revealed its hidden networks to someone with her keen sense of scrutiny. By the time they moved toward the central stage for a keynote toast, Agatha had the picture in her mind.
She understood who had betrayed Roy, how information had been funneled to Garrick Bloom, and the stakes of the upcoming confrontation. The glamour and polish of Begala had masked a web of deceit, but now the mask had slipped. Agatha Raisin felt the familiar thrill of impending revelation, the warmth of certainty that comes when clues align, and the cold sting of betrayal, both professional and personal, setting the stage for the moments to come.
The murmur of the gala had reached its polished crescendo when a sudden commotion near the entrance drew all eyes. Agatha Raisin, still scanning the crowd, caught movement that made her heart leap. The missing assistant was stumbling through the crowd, disheveled, hair mussed and clothing slightly torn, but very much alive. Gasps and murmurs spread like wildfire as guests stepped back, creating a corridor toward the stage. Agatha moved quickly, weaving through the crowd with Roy close behind, keeping her focus sharp. The assistant's steps were unsteady, and she clutched a small folder to her chest. "Help me," she gasped, her voice trembling, but audible enough to carry over the hum of conversation. Guests whispered among themselves, panic and curiosity intertwining. Serena Vale's eyes widened in horror and relief as she recognized her missing employee. Agatha crouched slightly to meet the assistant's gaze, gently guiding her toward a quiet corner behind a display table. "Take a breath," she urged, her voice firm but soothing. "Tell me everything, slowly." The assistant nodded shakily, blinking rapidly. I was taken, kept, hidden," she began, her voice tumbling out in a half-coherent rush. "It was to stop me from exposing the real architect, the scandal. Roy, it was someone at your agency, someone senior, felt overlooked, so I was silenced, until now." Agatha's eyes narrowed as she pieced together the fragments. Someone close to Roy, someone trusted within his own ranks, had secretly partnered with Garrick Bloom. They had provided him with insider information, orchestrated the sabotage, and timed the anonymous video perfectly to undermine Roy. The assistant's half-formed confession was enough. Agatha's instincts flared, the puzzle snapping into place. She scanned the crowd, noting a figure at the edge of the stage, eyes darting nervously and posture stiff with panic. It was the senior employee, face pale, lips pressed tightly, betraying every ounce of guilt. Agatha moved toward them deliberately, her presence commanding attention, even amid the gala's chaos. "We need to talk," she said calmly, every word deliberate, every eye in the room now following her. The trader's gaze locked on Agatha's, a mixture of fear and defiance flashing across their face. It wasn't supposed to," they stammered, stumbling backward, clearly weighing escape against confrontation. Agatha advanced steadily, guiding the assistant closer for support. "You underestimated the consequences," she said evenly. "Garrick Bloom may have promised advancement, but betrayal has a price. Now it ends here." Serena Vale, witnessing the scene, gasped audibly, her hands clasped over her mouth in dawning horror. The assistant, though still shaking, nodded in relief, clutching the proof of the elaborate scheme. The trader, realizing there was no room left to maneuver, finally sank into a chair near the stage, defeated, while Agatha addressed the surrounding witnesses. "This was a deliberate act of sabotage," she announced, her tone crisp, authoritative. "The conspiracy involved manipulation, insider knowledge, and collusion with Garrick Bloom. Thanks to courage and careful observation, the truth has been revealed." The room exhaled collectively, shock mingled with relief. Agatha gave the assistant a reassuring glance. The nightmare was over, and the long-hidden truths had finally surfaced. In the glittering hall, amidst the stunned murmurs and astonished faces, the conspiracy that had threatened careers, reputations, and even lives was laid bare, exposed by the persistence, intelligence, and quiet determination of Agatha Raisin. Chapter 8. Clearing the glittered debris. The morning after the gala dawned crisp and clear over Carsley, a quiet contrast to the chaos of the previous days. Agatha Raisin sipped her tea at her kitchen table, savoring the calm and the rare luxury of uninterrupted thought. Outside, birds flitted between the garden hedges, and the gentle hum of the village coming to life offered a welcome balm to a weary mind. The news had already spread. Garrick Bloom, sensing the tightening grip of police scrutiny and pressure from industry insiders, had vanished. His high-profile office now stood empty, files left in disarray, and whispers of his sudden departure rippled through the PR world. Agatha allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Justice had been served, at least for now. Roy Silver, though emotionally and professionally exhausted, was remarkably grateful. He appeared at Agatha's office later that morning, his expression earnest and slightly teary. "Agatha," he said, voice quivering, "I can't thank you enough. You've saved not just my career, but my reputation. I don't know what I would have done without you." Agatha shook her head, feigning exasperation as he fumbled with a crumpled handkerchief. "Roy, you're dramatic, as always. But yes, it's over, for now." Even Serena Vale, humbled by recent events, sought out Agatha. The previously polished and somewhat imperious PR rival now seemed genuinely contrite. "Agatha," she said softly, avoiding her usual practiced charm, "I owe you an apology for the competition, the tension, everything. I misjudged you and perhaps underestimated my own fear. Thank you for seeing the bigger picture." Agatha inclined her head with a wry smile, appreciating the sincerity. "It's all part of the business, though one hopes for fewer kidnappings in the future." The assistant, pale but recovering, had been taken into protective care, her bravery quietly celebrated behind the scenes. Agatha noted how even the most seemingly expendable staff could hold the keys to monumental revelations. The PR world might sparkle with glitz and ambition, but beneath the veneer lay vulnerabilities, human mistakes, misjudged trust, and greed. Returning to Carsley, Agatha felt the weight of the scandal finally ease, though not vanish entirely. The village streets welcomed her with the kind of comforting normalcy she craved. As she set her coat aside, she noticed a single unread email blinking on her computer screen, its subject line innocuous yet vaguely unsettling. She ignored it for the moment, choosing instead to pour herself a strong drink, a small ritual of reflection after surviving the latest whirlwind of PR drama and intrigue. Roy lingered by the doorway before leaving, fidgeting, as he mentioned, almost as an afterthought, "There's one last loose end." Agatha arched her eyebrow, resisting the urge to sigh. Some mysteries, it seems, never fully rested. But for now, peace, and perhaps a well-earned tipple, beckoned. She settled into her chair, savoring the warmth of her kitchen, the quiet of her village, and the satisfaction of having untangled yet another mess of ambition, betrayal, and scandal. In the soft light, she allowed herself a wry smile, reflecting that the glittering world of PR might always have its shadows, but Agatha Raisin had proven she could navigate them with intelligence, humor, and unshakable resolve. For now, that was enough. Agatha Raisin met Bill Wong in the soft light of her office that evening, the village streets outside slowly darkening as the quiet hum of Carsley settled in. They spread the files across the desk, the gala's chaos now behind them, and began reviewing the case with meticulous care. Each incident, each betrayal had been accounted for, the mole exposed, the assistant returned safely, and Garrick Bloom vanished under scrutiny. For the first time in days, a sense of completion settled over the room. Yet, as Agatha flipped through the financial records one last time, her sharp eyes caught a single anomaly. A transfer had occurred the night before the gala,
large, precise, and entirely unexplained. The entry bore no familiar signatures, no clear authorization. Whoever had made it had acted with the same careful discretion that marked Bloom's operations. Agatha frowned, tapping her finger against the page. "Bill, look at this. It wasn't Roy. It wasn't anyone we've identified, but it's tied to the agency." Bill leaned over, his brow furrowed. "That's troubling. Could it be an overlooked part of Bloom's scheme?" "Perhaps," Agatha said thoughtfully, tracing the paper trail. She discovered it led to an offshore account, the kind designed to obscure origin and ownership. The details were sparse, intentionally misleading, but they were enough to suggest a shadowy actor was still at work, lurking in the background. The timing was deliberate, the night before the gala, just as tensions were about to peak. Whoever orchestrated it knew the chaos it would coincide with. Bill sighed, leaning back in his chair. "We've neutralized the immediate threats, Agatha. Everyone we know involved has been exposed or accounted for. Maybe we just keep this file open, monitor it quietly, just in case." Agatha nodded, her expression thoughtful. She closed the folder gently, though the faint unease lingered. Some pieces of the puzzle would have to wait, hints of future disruption lying dormant for now. Carsley, for all its calm and charm, had a way of reminding her that peace was always temporary. Later, as Agatha walked home beneath the quiet glow of village streetlights, the cool night air carrying the scent of late-blooming flowers and freshly baked bread, her thoughts drifted over the events of the past weeks. The streets were serene, but she couldn't shake the faint impression of eyes watching from a parked car at the corner. Shadows held secrets, and she knew instinctively that this story, though seemingly concluded, wasn't fully finished. Reaching her cottage, Agatha closed the gate behind her and paused to glance back at the quiet street. She smiled, knowingly, the warmth of home and the ritual of returning to her familiar sanctuary easing the tension. The unexplained transfer, the offshore account, and the watchful eyes were reminders that mysteries had a way of returning. But for tonight, she allowed herself to enjoy the calm. Shutting her door behind her, Agatha Raisin let out a soft breath, leaning against the wood with a faint chuckle. Carsley's peace had returned, if only for a moment. Tomorrow, and the days after, would bring new challenges. But for now, she had solved another tangled web of deceit, survived another storm, and earned the comfort of quiet, well-deserved satisfaction.